Okay, good evening and welcome to The Hill. I am Christ Stirewalt, filling in for Blake Berman. New developments tonight is the administration's confrontation with Venezuela, this time bringing Iran into the fray. The White House announcing new sanctions on both countries over our alleged arms sales. Plus, breaking just minutes ago, the Trump administration makes another bold move to crack down on alleged welfare cheats in Minnesota as Maine Republicans up the ante on fraud allegations in that state. High politics.
We all knew this fraud was real and happening. Finally, after national media shined a light on it, Maine media is playing catch up. Despite all of this, what remains most striking is the complete silence for Maine Democrats.
High voltage politics, why your electricity prices are going up in 2026 and what that means for midterms. And at this hour, cities across America get ready to ring in the new year. We're live in New York City, where the police commissioner says the entirety of the NYPD is working the Big Apple ball drop. But first, Trump's next target, the U.S. imposing sanctions on Iranian and Venezuelan companies and individuals over alleged weapons deals. The administration says it's a direct threat to the United States and its allies. The new warning coming as the administration launches more deadly Venezuelan boat strikes. And on Iran, the president vowing very powerful consequences if the country rebuilds its nuclear weapons program. Tehran tonight answering back. We'll talk to White House Deputy Press Secretary Anna Kelly in a moment. Joe Khalil covering the latest actions against Venezuela. But first, live to our own Kelly Meyer at the White House with the president's fresh threat against Iran. Kelly?
Hey there, Chris. So the U.S. slapping a new sanction on Iran and Venezuela today. Those targeted include Venezuelan company allegedly linked to millions of dollars of Iranian drone sales to Venezuela, and also targeted include 3 Iran-based individuals who are allegedly part of an effort to procure chemicals used for ballistic missiles. This a day after President Trump issuing Iran a warning not to restart its nuclear program or there will be, quote, very powerful consequences. That includes potential military action like we saw this summer with the B-2 strikes on 3 Iranian nuclear facilities. President Trump suggesting a new response could be more powerful than that operation.
Now I hear that Iran is trying to build up again, and if they are, we're going to have to knock them down. We'll knock them down. We'll knock the hell out of them, but hopefully that's not happening. I heard Iran wants to make a deal. If they want to make a deal, that's much smarter.
Iran's president responding today saying, quote, any oppressive aggression will be harsh and regrettable, end quote. Iran's president also speaking with Russian President Vladimir Putin today. According to the Kremlin, the 2 leaders spoke about Iran's nuclear program. They also talked about strengthening cooperation between Russia and Iran, both deeply sanctioned, too. It comes as anti-Iran regime protesters hit Tehran and other cities across the country as Iran falls further into an economic crisis. Iran's inflation is at a startling 42%, and the Iranian currency is at its record low, sparking protests in Tehran and other parts of the country. Iran's president has urged authorities to listen to the, quote, legitimate demands of the protesters. And President Trump also voiced support for those protesters on Monday while stopping short of calling for regime change. Chris?
Kelly Meyer, we thank you. President Trump's pressure campaign against Nicolas Maduro is reaching a new level. The commander-in-chief announcing the first U.S. land strikes against Venezuela.
There was a major explosion in the dock area where they load the boats up with drugs. They load the boats up with drugs, so we hit all the boats, and now we hit the area. It's a implementation area. That's where they implement, and that is no longer around.
Our own Joe Khalil is following the latest fallout as lawmakers demand answers from the president on his endgame in Venezuela. Joe?
Yeah, and Chris, we got some reaction today from congressional lawmakers as President Trump himself was the one to confirm that last week there was a strike that hit a target inside of Venezuelan territory, a port that the president says was used by Tren de Aragua. This is the first time in the life of this conflict that has happened. Not a strike off the coast, but actually on Venezuelan land. And many lawmakers have seen that as an escalation of this conflict. Congressman Ami Bera we spoke with, who's on on the Intelligence Committee. He says he hasn't gotten a briefing about it yet, but he expects the committee is going to get that information likely sometime next week. And he says he worries that an escalation like this could potentially lead to American boots on the ground. This is what he told us.
I don't believe that Maduro wants a direct kinetic conflict with the United States. I think that would end badly for Venezuela. But I also don't think the American public wants to see boots on the ground, our men and women in harm's way, because it wouldn't be an easy fight.
Now, Chris, to be clear, no one in the administration, certainly not Secretary of State Rubio, have suggested that their goal is to have an American military presence inside of Venezuela. Nonetheless, President Trump is not ruling out more strikes on land. Already, some 30 boats have been targeted. More than 100 Venezuelans have been killed so far, now on land and in the water. And President Trump says again that this may happen more because he believes the strategy is working.
All right, Joe Khalil, we thank you. Joining us now, Anna Kelly, Deputy White House Press Secretary. Ms. Kelly, thanks for making time for us today. On Venezuela, what, if any, are the practical limits to the president's commitment to this effort against the Maduro government? The strategy seems like it's aimed at isolating and destabilizing his government through enforcing the sanctions and killing the drug runners who help finance it. When would U.S. troops be involved? Would it be helping remove him in the event of a revolt, only as peacekeepers if a new government takes power? Give us the broad outlines.
Sure, Chris. Well, thanks for having me on. And I'm glad you brought up strategy, because the truth is the president has been very clear and consistent about his strategy, which he's been working on since day one. Remember, it took just a short time into office for this president to secure the border, which is a major campaign promise upon which he was elected. That stopped not only the flood of illegal criminals into our country, it also stopped the flood of illegal drugs by land. But this president also has been very clear Maduro is not the legitimate ruler of Venezuela. He is the leader of a narco-terrorist cartel. And we also must take on the trafficking of these illegal drugs by sea, which was also a major campaign promise that he made back in 2023 to take on the cartel. So the president will continue to take decisive action, stopping the flow of these illicit narcotics into our country that are tragically killing Americans in the form of tens of thousands of families who are sadly losing loved ones every year to this scourge.
Okay, but in terms of the boundary line on where we might go, where the president might deploy U.S. forces, is that to help remove Maduro, or could you see a role for U.S. forces if Maduro falls, if there's a domestic revolt? Talk about that a little bit.
Well, look, Chris, I'm not in the business, as you know, of getting ahead of the president on any actions he might take. But look, the president, again, has been incredibly clear that Maduro is not the legitimate ruler of Venezuela. He is the leader of a narco-terrorist cartel. And remember, the president has long been talking about the impacts of this horrific drug trade that is killing Americans across our country. I'm sure you remember Ann Fundner, a victim who he elevated during the Republican National Convention, who told the tragic story of her 15-year-old son who was killed with one pill laced with fentanyl. That's unacceptable. There is no amount of drugs entering our country by land or by sea that is acceptable to this president. So he's going to continue to take decisive action to stop this horrific trend of illicit narcotics coming into our homeland and killing Americans.
Okay, at what point does Congress have to come into this story? Even the Republican lawmakers who we talk to, who are broadly supportive of the administration's approach here, seem to draw a bright line at any deployments of U.S. forces on the ground. Would that require congressional authorization?
Well, look, the president has been extremely transparent with members of Congress, keeping them apprised of all of these actions that we've been taking in Venezuela with regard to these narco-terrorist strikes. To date, we've had well over 20 bipartisan briefings, by the way, where these members of Congress have reviewed materials, videos of these strikes that we have been taking, again, against designated narco-terrorists trying to poison our homeland with illicit narcotics. And so he's going to continue to keep members of Congress apprised, as he's done. But he's also been clear, as commander-in-chief, he has the executive authority to strike these designated narco-terrorists in international waters that are trying to bring illegal drugs into our country and kill Americans.
Okay, let's go to another troublesome story in the world. Iran. The president has said in no uncertain terms that the U.S. will strike Iran again if he believes that Tehran is reconstituting its nuclear program. But right now, Domestic instability seems to be a bigger issue for Iran than projecting force outside of its borders. The currency has collapsed there, and days of protest and public unrest seem to pose a real threat to the mullah's rule. How does the administration approach the possibility of revolution or the collapse of the regime there? I know the president says America is not pursuing regime change on its own, but I assume that there have to be contingencies if the current regime looks like it's about to fall.
Well, Glenn, Chris, I'm not going to get ahead of the president on any positions. I know he was asked about that yesterday. But look, again, Iran cannot be allowed to possess a nuclear weapon. That is something that this president has been very consistent about. And thankfully, thanks to the success of Operation Midnight Hammer, which totally obliterated Iran's nuclear facilities, we have greater stability in the Middle East than ever before. That is what paved the way for this tremendous buy-in that we had with over a dozen Arab and Muslim majority countries that came together to provide critical feedback into the president's 20-point plan for peace in Gaza. And so it's really great that this president took that decisive action, because that paved the way for this historic peace that we're seeing now. And he's been very clear. He's not afraid to use the might of the United States military if Iran tries again to build up its nuclear facilities. But again, he's been incredibly clear. They cannot, as the largest state sponsor of terror in our world, be allowed to possess a nuclear weapon.
Okay, in the wake of last month's election, we've seen a concerted effort by the administration to focus on pocketbook issues like affordability and high prices. But this past week has seen a lot of focus on foreign policy. Some of it's just responding to events, like some of the ones we're talking about, but others are the president's own initiatives. How does this get in the way, or does it get in the way of the preferred messaging of the White House on domestic issues?
Well, I think those things go hand in glove, Chris, because look, it's true. The president has invested a lot of time in working with foreign leaders, and all of those conversations, by the way, have resulted in major deals, investments, deliverables for our country. The president had extraordinary courage to correct decades, not just under Democrats, but decades of Republican even, unfair trading practices, which tragically resulted in an unlevel playing field for American farmers, workers, manufacturers. This president has negotiated fairer trade deals and is willing to look anyone in the eye to bring home major investments into our country. A lot of those investments are going to continue to materialize in the form of good paying jobs and reshored manufacturing industries that have, again, been sold out by decades of unfair trading practices. So all of this president's foreign policy actions have resulted in global stability, which is also America first, but also are bringing back specific major deliverables in the form of trade deals, investments, good news for Americans here at home.
Okay, 2026 is a milestone birthday year for our nation, which is why it's cool that Americans are going to get to see on New Year's Eve the Washington Monument all lit up. It's sort of a good kickoff. Instead of dropping the ball, we're gonna raise that up here in Washington to kick off the USA 250 year. It's a big deal for the president. It's a big deal for the administration. Some people have expressed concern that these celebrations may be too partisan or too much about the current president himself, sort of too Trump branded. Talk about any efforts you all have undertaken to make this a nonpartisan celebration and really try to get buy-in from Americans of all walks of life.
Well, America's 250th anniversary is, in and of itself, a unifying celebration. I mean, this is a celebration of the birthday of our country. And so, of course, this president, the entire administration, and also Freedom 250, which is an entity that recently launched, are all working together alongside the America 250 Commission to truly create a momentous, historic, unifying celebration of America's birthday. And so, as you mentioned, the Washington Monument will be lit up from December 31st through January 5th, 6 nights from 7 p.m. To midnight. That's something that all Americans can come to our nation's capital to enjoy free of charge, no tickets required. And I think Americans are going to continue to see really exciting events in the form of the Great American State Fair that is going to come to Washington, D.C., the Patriot Games. These are all really exciting events that are meant to celebrate our shared story as Americans. And so what better way to kick that off with a wonderful illumination of our Washington Monument, serving as a birthday candle of sorts, kicking off this historic 2026 year.
Okay, Ms. Kelly, thank you very much for your time, and a Happy New Year to you. Coming up, just minutes ago, the Trump administration announced a bold new step to stop the welfare fraud scandal rocking Minnesota, plus a power play in the Pacific, China making some aggressive moves around Taiwan. Is it a rehearsal or a warning? And speaking of power, the hot button issue of 2026 could be your electric bill. Why energy costs may decide the next election. I'm Christ Stirewalt. The Hill is coming right back. Welcome back. Some breaking news. Just minutes ago, the Department of Health and Human Services announced it is freezing child care payments to Minnesota over allegations of rampant fraud in that state. Federal agents have been investigating this week after a viral video suggesting some of the state's daycare centers are sitting empty despite receiving tens of millions of government funds. New details uncovered by NewsNation show claims like these could go beyond daycare centers to assisted living facilities, too. And over in Maine, Republicans in the state's legislature are demanding answers after similar fraud allegations have surfaced, centering on the state's Medicaid program. This after a whistleblower spoke to NewsNation alleging that a contractor called Gateway Community Services overbilled the government. We have team coverage on every angle in this story. Alex Capriello has the latest out of Maine, but first, our own Rich McHugh is live in Minnesota with new details from his investigation, now months in the making. Rich?
Hi, Chris. Yeah, prosecutors have uncovered billions, $9 billion in fraud here, and they've focused on 14 programs that fraudsters use to defraud Medicaid. We got a tip a month ago about another one, and our reporting now suggests that we've found the 15th program that they've used, and it's assisted living. So we looked at the data, we pulled the information, and what it shows that the number of people getting help here in assisted living facilities is up, double the growth in other programs. But here's the kicker, the rate of payment in the assisted living space is 10 to 15 times the growth in other programs. So we pulled data on assisted living facilities in the Minneapolis area. Minneapolis has a lot, 116. St. Paul, population of 300,000, has 83. But Brooklyn Center, population of just 30,000, has 106. And Brooklyn Park, population of 84,000, has 181, more than Minneapolis, a city 5 times its size. One assisted living facility puts this all into perspective. A defendant in the Feeding Our Future scandal owns a few assisted living facilities here and is continuing to bill the state while awaiting his trial. Gandhi Mohammed was indicted for laundering $1 million in that Feeding Our Future case. His LLC owns homes around Minneapolis. Last year, they brought in $2.3 million from the state. Why are they getting the money? I asked State Representative Kristen Robbins, she's the chair of the Minnesota Fraud Prevention Committee, and how this is possible.
I honestly have no idea. It seems like the most basic due diligence would have been to run a check of all the people indicted in Feeding Our Future and then make sure they're not getting paid from other state programs.
Now, we asked the Department of Human Services here. They ultimately said, look, we're bound by the statute because this man owns this property doesn't mean we can ultimately yank funding. His wife is the one who's running the assisted living facility, so they're passing the buck a bit. Chris?
All right, Rich McHugh, stay warm out there. We appreciate you. Now to Alex Capriello with the latest on the allegations in Maine. Alex, what can you tell us?
Yeah, hey there, Chris. House Oversight Committee Chair James Comer, he's already requested a thorough accounting of bank statements tied to the social services program called Gateway, which is at the center of these lawmaker allegations. Maine Republicans taking the stage today to question why it's taken so long to get to that point. Well, to answer that question quickly, the state officials thanked investigators like NewsNation's Rich McHugh, who we just heard from. He was the one who actually broke this story weeks ago. He spoke to a whistleblower who revealed the allegations of fraud tied to Gateway, a group which claims to provide social services for immigrants, but is now alleged to have filed false records and bilked millions of dollars from Maine taxpayers by defrauding the state's Medicaid program. That's called MaineCare.
A company whose CEO reportedly spent time traveling to Somalia and running for president there and organizing a privately funded militia, all while his organization was overbilling programs funded by Maine taxpayers. Where is the outrage from Maine Democrats? Where are the press conferences? Where are the calls for accountability?
Today, the lawmakers gave us some hard and fast numbers on how MaineCare has been targeted. They say in 2024, more than 5,000 companies billed the state's Medicaid program, and that there were less than 24 employees actually in charge of ensuring that each of those claims was valid. During this time, Gateway billed more than $4 million. A common refrain we heard today, Chris, from those GOP lawmakers was, this is just the tip of the iceberg. They believe there are deep connections between the fraud schemes alleged to be carried out by Somali immigrants in both Maine and Minnesota. On top of that, I reached out to Gateway for a response to the allegations made in that press conference. A spokesperson tells me he believes these allegations are political in nature, that they're all untrue, and that the organization will continue to cooperate with oversight committees. Chris?
Alex, we thank you. Okay, there is still much more ahead for you on the Hill, including New York City preparing for one of the biggest New Year's celebrations in the world. But as the ball drops, security will be on high alert. We'll take a look at the preparations, plus new details on the former Olympic athlete authorities say became a gold medal drug kingpin, and the shocking items seized at his home, including more than $40 million worth of high-end motorcycles. Wow. Welcome back. Let's take a look at some of the stories that are developing at this hour. Cleanup is underway in southwestern Kentucky after 31 train cars derailed this morning near the Tennessee border. At least one of the cars was leaking a dangerous chemical, prompting a temporary shelter-in-place order that has now been lifted. There were no reported injuries, and the cause of the derailment is still under investigation. A judge in Washington, D.C. is considering whether to release the man accused of planting pipe bombs around the nation's capital as his lawyers cite his autism diagnosis. Brian Cole is accused of planting the devices outside the RNC and the DNC headquarters the night before the January 6th storming of the Capitol, devices that never detonated. Prosecutors counter that the bombs were viable and say it was luck, not effort, that no one was hurt, and argue that the evidence against him is overwhelming. Mexican authorities have seized a staggering $40 million worth of high-end motorcycles believed to belong to a former Olympic athlete, now on the FBI's most wanted list. Officials say 62 motorcycles, along with vehicles, artwork, drugs, and Olympic medals, were recovered during raids on 4 properties in Mexico City. The items are allegedly linked to Ryan Wedding, a former Canadian Olympic snowboarder accused of running an international cocaine trafficking ring. The FBI is offering $15 million in reward for information leading to his arrest. Agents believe Wedding remains in Mexico and is being protected by the Sinaloa cartel. Preparations are well underway in Times Square as New York gears up for the biggest night of the year, with more than 1 million people expected to pack into Midtown for the New Year's Eve ball drop. The NYPD is rolling out a massive security operation. City leaders say there is no credible threat at this time, but thousands of officers will be deployed, both seen and unseen this year. Police are already beefing up entry points and mobile screening teams inside the secure zone. Well, Jessica Cartalia is in New York with the latest ahead of tomorrow's celebration. Hi, Jessica.
Hi, Chris. Yeah, it feels like there's already about 1 million people here in Times Square. You can hear all of the activity behind me. We've seen officers here. We've also seen bomb-sniffing dogs making their way through. Organizers in Times Square are really getting ready for the biggest night of the year. But as you mentioned, law enforcement will also be out in full force. Some New Year's Eve celebrations have been canceled or scaled back altogether due to potential terror threats. According to a new report compiled by the FBI and Homeland Security, these so-called lone wolves or small radicalized groups tend to be the biggest threat to major U.S. cities. Here in New York City, where more than 1 million people are expected to come to Times Square, security is being beefed up big time. Take a listen.
There will be assets that you will see and others that you will not see. The Joint Operations Center will be fully activated with all of our city, state, and federal partners, and personnel there will be actively monitoring fixed and mobile cameras. Intelligence teams will also be monitoring social media for potential threats, and response units will be deployed citywide to investigate any reports in real time.
Now, just 2 weeks ago, federal agents announced that they stopped an alleged New Year's Eve terror plot in Los Angeles, disrupting what investigators called Operation Midnight Sun. Authorities say that the plan involved attacks at multiple locations during New Year's celebrations. And in New Orleans, National Guard troops will begin patrolling today as part of their heavy security presence for New Year's events. This deployment was authorized by President Trump, of course, coming 1 year after the deadly attack on Bourbon Street. But Chris, officials say despite the heightened alert, they are confident that these security measures are in place to keep celebrations safe and fun. And let me tell you, from the people who are out here today, it's beautiful weather. I mean, albeit chilly, but it's not raining. It's nice and clear, and it should be a great and hopefully very safe event here in Manhattan.
Jessica, good vibes only. I like the energy. Thank you very much, and have a great time. Okay, as China launches its largest ever live-fire military drills around Taiwan, new reports show Beijing is also expanding its military footprint far from home by pushing submarines into the Arctic. From the Pacific to the high north, it signals a coordinated show of force testing whether the United States can deter simultaneous threats across multiple regions. President Trump saying none of it bothers him.
Well, I have a great relationship with President Xi, and he hasn't told me anything about it. I certainly have seen it, but he hasn't told me anything about it, and I don't believe he's going to be doing it.
Does it worry you?
No, nothing worries me.
Nothing worries me. Joining us now to break down what this means, retired Rear Admiral Mark Montgomery. Admiral, thanks for being here. Okay. We have submarines under the polar ice cap. Who has submarines under the polar ice cap? Should I be worried that China has submarines under the polar ice cap?
So thank you for having me. Routinely, the United States and Russia have submarines under the polar ice cap.
And this is something we've been doing since the Cold War.
So 50 years.
Yeah.
And, you know, so China getting into this game what it is a demonstration of submarine development.
Okay.
That should worry us overall because there's one area where we think we have an asymmetric advantage over China, and that's in submarines. So this worries me. I worry a lot more about, say, Russia giving China quieting technology for their submarines as a payback for support in Ukraine. That's the number one thing that bothers me. The U.S. Indo-PACOM commander, Admiral Paparo, has hinted that he's worried about that, probably worried based on intelligence. So that worries, the Arctic worries me.
Yeah.
The Chinese, quieting technology would,
And this is the hunt for Red October kind of stuff where they could park their missile boats near the United States and we wouldn't be able to detect them as easily.
Or they could approach our submarines in a pre-combat situation, so when the war starts, they could immediately begin shooting. Our submarines, our aircraft carriers, our surface ships.
I don't want to be a bummer around New Year's Eve, but how big is the Chinese nuclear arsenal compared to ours? Talk about that.
So ours and the Russians is in balance because of now expired treaty agreements.
Right.
But the Chinese one was much smaller, but they have grown significantly. In fact, the last 2 years worth of Chinese military power reports, a report just put out by the Pentagon last week, point directly to the growth in the Chinese nuclear capability, their nuclear weapons capability as their number one growth area over the last 2 years. And so they're growing fast. They look like they have no intention of doing any kind of arms limitations with us and the Russians.
So what do? We get better sub-hunters? How do we respond?
Continue to invest in our own submarine program where we are world-class.
Yeah.
We're struggling to build them. So continue to make that investment so we have more and more of our own, what are called Virginia-class attack submarines. And then obviously continue to work on our anti-submarine capability, our ability to hunt Chinese submarines using destroyers, aircraft, and other submarines.
Okay, the last piece here. I don't know how to respond or think about what China does with Taiwan. Is this for domestic political propaganda consumption? We're making a lot of noise around Taiwan. Is this to menace Taiwan? Is it all of these things? What is this?
So it's done in response to two things. One, our $11 billion foreign military sales package, which President Trump's administration announced 2 weeks ago. And 3 weeks ago, the Japanese prime minister very publicly said, a threat to Taiwan is an existential threat to Japan. In response to both those, and exactly for the reason you said, for their domestic political consumption, they're very aggressively going at this. I also think they're trying to signal to Taiwan, to the opposition parties, you need to, continue to push for better relations with us and not this kind of independent streak or a streak that relies on the United States as a as a potential military partner.
Well, whatever happens, it's the Navy that's out there on the front line. Admiral, we thank you for your time. Happy New Year. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
We appreciate you. Be well, be well. Okay, coming up, after weeks trying to regain the narrative on domestic issues, a hard pivot to foreign policy by President Trump. How's it playing? Our panel is next.
NewsNation has been following these fraud allegations, first reporting on the state's troubled finances back in November.
Billions have been lost since 2019.
I am not surprised that fraud is being uncovered here. It has gone ignored by our mainstream media here in Minnesota.
This is the place that digs deeper for all Americans.
We've had other outlets, yourself, that have done a great job trying to shine the light. NewsNation reporting on this. We have finally gotten the national attention.
Trust NewsNation.
All of this president's foreign policy actions have resulted in global stability, which is also America first, but also are bringing back specific major deliverables in the form of trade deals, investments, good news for Americans here at home.
Deputy White House Press Secretary Anna Kelly says there's no conflict between the president's foreign focus and his domestic goals, but increasing international intervention has triggered some concern in the MAGA movement. So what's the future for America First? That's a good question. Maybe the panel will join us. You know Sabrina Siddiqui. She's the national politics reporter at the Wall Street Journal. Say hello to Megan Hayes. She's the former director of message planning at the Biden White House. And say hi to Lance Trover. He's a former advisor to Interior Secretary Doug Burgum, and he has been a Republican flack and doer of deeds around the city for a long time. So we've got a good team here for us. Lance, I want to start with you. Marjorie Taylor Greene, Tucker Carlson. No, you can't.
Yes.
These were people who made Trump and Trumpism and MAGA possible.
Sure.
And these are people who are disquiet about what the president's doing overseas. We're playing with Iran, we're Venezuela-ing, the list seems to grow. Is there an inherent conflict there?
No, absolutely not. I mean, when you have countries like China and Iran and Russia all converging into Venezuela, that affects our national security. What's more America first than protecting our national security? Absolutely not. There's no conflict at all. At 100%. Yes, the Marjorie Taylor Greenes of the world who like to go on The View now and have sided with your party and want to go on the New York Times and stuff, yes, they have problems with it. But 90% of the Republican Party is still with the president.
And it's cool with that. Okay, well, Megan, one upside to this stuff is watching Democrats on domestic policy. Democrats have been just it's been a brutal autumn into winter for the Republicans and for the president on domestic policy. Foreign policy, it's harder, right? Because you don't want to sound like you're pro-Maduro. You don't want to say, and voters don't engage on this question as much. Persuadable voters, it's, I guess, a long way of saying, probably better for Trump to be engaging with Democrats on this question than on domestic questions.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a firm believer, as working in the White House 2 different times, that the president has to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time. So he has to be able to work on domestic issues and foreign policy. The problem we have here is he's not doing either one very well. And when people can't afford groceries and gas and their electric bills, they don't care what's going on in Ukraine. They don't care what's going on in Venezuela. They don't care what's going on in Iran. They can't pay their own bills. So you got to get our own house in order before you start doing other things. I firmly agree with you that there are definite positives to taking care of some of these things, but Trump needs to be able to explain better what he's doing on the domestic front while he's doing stuff on the foreign front.
Sabrina, you know what a lame duck president loves?
Many things.
Many things, but they love raising money for presidential libraries. They love a lot of things, but they love foreign policy because they can do it on their own. They don't really need Congress. And these are big legacy builders. Do you when you look at the next 3 years of Donald Trump, are we going to see more Peace Prize lobbying and more of this stuff or something else?
Well, I think that it's been quite clear President Trump sees these peace talks, whether it has to do with Russia's war in Ukraine or Israel's war in Gaza, as a part of his legacy. I do think that there is a genuine desire within his administration to wind down these conflicts that have been drawn out. And it does actually fit within his broader framework of disentangling the U.S. from overseas conflicts, because the U.S. provides a lot of support to Ukraine, provides a lot of support to Israel.
Right.
In Venezuela, I think you're seeing a separate picture where you know there is this risk of escalation of engaging in yet another conflict that runs counter to his non-interventionist intuitions. But you know, I want to piggyback off something that Megan said, which is that you know probably the last time we saw foreign policy really play a central role in an election was 2008, and it was in the Democratic primary, the Iraq War. I would say that you know the general was still ultimately about the economy. When it comes to voters and their priorities, it is the economy, it is cost of living, it is jobs. And so whatever it is that President Trump does, from a legacy standpoint, from an accomplishment standpoint, I think that's something that'll be more, you know, about the history books. I think when it comes to midterms and then however he tees up Republicans for next presidential election, that's very much going to be about domestic priorities.
I want you all to know that I did not show Sabrina the questions in advance. She did not have access. The good people at PricewaterhouseCoopers kept this in a sealed vault because, Lance, I want to ask you, I want you to look at this graphic first about what's going on with people's electricity costs. And here's your hint, it's not super. It's now 7.4% increase in people's electric costs. For working class families, we're talking here about, could be $100, couple $100 a month. For the administration, gas prices are down, no question. We've seen a decrease in fuel costs, but people's home energy costs are going up, 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 up. How do Republicans deal with this? How does the administration deal with this?
Well, I just drove through your home state on my way to Illinois, so gas prices are down.
They're down.
States, they 100% are. Look, I think this comes down to permitting reform, and this is an area of bipartisan agreement on Capitol Hill. The House passed the bill about a week and a half ago with some Democratic votes. It wasn't quite as probably bipartisan as we'd like it to be, but it's being kicked over to the Senate, where they're going to have to work with the Democrats to get to 60 on the renewable front. I think this is how we expand and make it easier to do oil production, natural gas production, and other types of energy production in this country that will help bring the cost down. To me, that's where it all lies, and that's what we're looking at, to me, is going to be one of the biggest bills next year.
Megan, you want to see a political ad?
Sure.
Why not? Let's take a look. Can we take a look at that spot?
And I'll stop the construction of any AI data center that threatens to raise our electricity bills or poison our water supply.
Okay, now I have to say, so the Wall Street Journal report on this today was very edifying. Obviously. It's not data centers that are principally driving this increase. It is disruption of energy flows by weather. It is a weak electrical grid. It is also a lot of regulations that were put in place by the Obama and Biden administrations limiting how people can make and get electricity. So does Lance have a point to say that if you want to bring these energy prices down, you got to roll back some of that stuff?
Absolutely. I don't necessarily think that data centers should have free range without regulation and let them go free will, and then everyone else has to pick up. They're getting a lot of tax breaks, and so everyone else is picking up a lot of their costs. The other thing, though, here is Trump decided to suspend or cut or freeze some of the infrastructure money that was going out, and these grids need to be redone because that is also, these repairs are going to take things off the grid, take lines off the grid, and it's going to continue to drive prices up. So a lot of that stuff, the infrastructure money needs to start flowing back into states because that will also help bring the cost of energy down. So there's a lot of factors here, but something has to give because people cannot afford to live.
Okay, so this for you believe this is going to be not energy, but cost generally, prices will be the dominant issue for 26.
Without a doubt. I mean, we have, barring anything unforeseen, that's what we've seen in our Wall Street Journal polling that's been borne out in other polls. And I talk to voters all the time in my job. Stay on a journey with me. I talk to Obama to Trump to Biden to Trump voters often. I find them and I look for them.
You look fabulous. That's right.
And when you ask, how do you go from Obama to Trump to Biden to Trump, and where are you going to go from there? Time and again, what comes up is cost of living. And if people are continuously paying more for their groceries, if they feel like they have to cut back on vacations, if they can't, afford supplies for their kids, just the day-to-day costs that people who still can't afford to buy a house, even if they're 40 years old and they feel like they may never be able to afford to buy a house, that is the issue that is not just going to, I think, define the midterms, but potentially still be one of the main issues that both parties have to contend with in 2020.
And there you have it, panel. Happy New Year. Thank you guys so much for being with us. That is great. Coming up, is it George or George? Why one of America's biggest stars just gained French citizenship. Stick around. Welcome back to The Hill on this New Year's Eve. If you're just joining us, here are some of the top headlines on thehill.com. Starting with this, federal judge allows HHS to share Medicaid data with ICE, a big win for the Trump administration after a group of more than 20 Democratic states sued in July. A U.S. district judge saying it's within ICE's power to acquire location data from Health and Human Services as long as that data only involves undocumented immigrants. While people living unlawfully in the United States cannot enroll in federal Medicaid programs, some blue states like California allow certain Medicaid-funded benefits for those groups, which is why the Trump administration fought for the data. HHS can officially begin sharing with ICE for deportation cases starting January 6. Also, what to know about Iowa State Senate special election. Even as we speak, voters across Iowa are heading to the polls to pick a new state senator in a race that could allow Republicans to regain a supermajority. And George Clooney family get French citizenship. Ooh la la. In a naturalization decree, the French government saying Clooney, his wife Amal, and their twin daughters are officially citizens. The Clooneys have lived in France the last couple of years. In recent months, Clooney said he wanted to raise his kids away from the Hollywood spotlight. Zoot allures. To check out these stories and more, visit thehill.com. Finally, we say hello to the folks in Cedar Hill, Texas. Cedar Hill is a southwestern suburb of Dallas where preparations are being made for a New Year's celebration that proves everything is bigger in Texas. At the Reunion Tower, a local landmark, it's the 10th annual Lone Star New Year's Eve celebration, where more than 5,000 pyrotechnic effects will be launched from the tower, along with 500 drones. So from RR Hill to yours, we hope you have a yeehaw kind of New Year. Elizabeth Vargas reports is next. Hannah Doba's digging into the search for the missing Malaysian Airlines plane, which just restarted today. She's talking to investigative journalist Jeff Wise on whether the plane can be found. Thanks for watching.